Hello and welcome to a video about financial literacy in support of the new 2020 Ontario Math Curriculum. Financial literacy is a new component of the curriculum. It is a topic that has perhaps been indirectly explored before in the previous curriculum, but it is now a new required part. Financial literacy is strand F, and there is one overall expectation for grades 7 and 8, and it is demonstrate the knowledge and skills needed to make informed financial decisions. So this video will explore some of the concepts students will learn and make connections to the number strand as well. So after spending a short time on the data strand, specific expectation 1.6, at the start of January, so you may spend about 1 week just looking at graphs. The OCDSB scope and sequence moves into a block of learning focused on financial literacy, with many opportunities to connect to concepts in the number strand. It is also a great time to do a mathematical modeling task with your students, as these tasks naturally combine data, financial literacy, and number. Just a reminder also that on the scope and sequence, you will find many additional resources, and many of them are used and discussed in this video. You'll find diagnostic tasks that will allow you to observe students' understanding before beginning your lessons, and resources to support your planning and instruction. So there are 3 topics in this financial literacy strand that we'll break down in this video: money concepts, financial management, and consumer and civic awareness. Money concepts for grade 7 and 8 relate to other currencies, exchange rates, and for grade 8, there's a little more about methods of payment. Financial management relates to setting and reaching financial goals, and for grade 8, they'll take a deeper dive into the concepts of simple and compound interest. Consumer and civic awareness also relates to interest rates in order to make decisions about borrowing money and investing money. Ultimately here, the goal for students is to be able to make informed financial decisions relevant to their lived experiences, to make connections to what they're learning in media literacy, as well as social studies, history, and geography curriculums, and really to become informed consumers. So as I previously mentioned, it's really important to make connections when teaching financial literacy to other strands in the new curriculum. And you can read more about this in the curriculum context. So specifically, there's so many connections to be made to number, for example, percent to calculate sales tax and interest, proportional reasoning to determine conversions, unit rates to compare goods and services, and connects to the mental math and math facts to be able to make quick decisions when it comes to buying and selling and any kind of financial decisions. Also, mathematical modeling to understand real-life financial situations and their applications. And finally, social emotional learning. It is so important that students leave this unit of study understanding each person, family, or community may be facing a different financial situation. And some of these financial situations may be even challenging or difficult. Having a safe, respectful, and inclusive environment will make sure that all perspectives and opinions are valued and included when thinking about and learning about financial concepts. So we're going to go now into the specific expectations that you'll find in the new curriculum. The first expectation, F1.1, focuses on exchange rates and currency conversions. So the easiest way to find the daily exchange rate for another currency is just to go to Google and type it in there. So for example, you can type CAD in USD, for example, and it'll give you the exchange rate for $1 Canadian equals, on this particular day, 0.79 or 79 cents in USD, in United States dollars. So grade 7 students will understand that international currencies have different values compared to Canadian currencies, and the current exchange rate does fluctuate each day, and it's used to convert Canadian currencies into other currencies. There is connections, of course, to number here for grade 7 and grade 8. These are proportional relationships. So working with them and doing currency conversions does involve solving proportional problems. So how might they do that? So this can be written as a ratio, can be written as a fraction. So as they're thinking about doing a conversion, so how much is $85 Canadian in US dollars? One way to do that is to think about writing equivalent ratios or equivalent fractions and figuring out that conversion. So this is a ratio table here showing 1 Canadian dollar is 0.79 US dollars. We can scale that up to 10 or 100. And we can also think about if I multiply this by 85, I need to multiply the 79 cents by 85. So thinking multiplicatively and thinking about writing equivalent fractions is all goes into this proportional reasoning concept and in application of doing currency conversions. So as I mentioned, grade 8 students are focusing in a little more on methods of payment. So methods of payment is defined as a means that a buyer uses to compensate the seller for a good or service. Typical payment methods that the new curriculum suggests is here: cash, checks, credit, debit cards, money orders, bank transfers, electronic wire transfers, credit cards, online payment services. Students will start to look at these methods of payment starting in grade 4 and then again in grade 6, where they start to discuss advantages and disadvantages of each. So from these earlier grades, they should be familiar with the idea that we pay for goods and services. And these are two different components of everyday business that happens in the world. And consumers really need to choose which method of payment to use, and this will vary depending on individual circumstances and contexts. So if you're looking for resources to support this learning, a really good resource that is brand new is the OEME Ontario Math Support. And if you go there, you'll find lots of useful information, but also specific lessons for grade 7 and 8 that are totally fleshed out with all the resources. I found this quite useful when I was thinking about this idea of advantages and disadvantages of methods of payment. And this comes straight from actually the grade 6 lesson on financial literacy for what students may say are the advantages and disadvantages of cash, for example, credit, debit, and gift cards. So you may want to pause the video and read this. I found it quite helpful to think about. So grade 8s, though, need to take this idea of advantages and disadvantages of using different methods of payments and think about that as connected to also using multiple types of currency. So this has a connection to maybe traveling. So if you're traveling and you're paying for something in another currency, or you're in a country that's using a different currency, what are the advantages to maybe using your debit card versus using your credit card? So we thought about that and just expanded this idea of sample student responses for what about if you're working in other currencies or even multiple currencies. So for example, your credit card will add on additional fees if you're using it in the States, for example. If you're shopping, it's going to take the exchange rate and add on a couple percentages. There'll be an additional fee versus if you're going to be using cash, you can go to the bank in Canada and you can exchange your money ahead of time. You could also exchange your money at an airport. That may cost you a little bit more. So things you need to think about. I mean, you don't want to take a whole bunch of cash. You can lose it. There still is a fee for exchanging money. It may or may not be higher than what your credit card may charge you. So things that you need to think about when you're working with multiple currencies and trying to decide how to pay for something. The next specific expectation is expectation 1.2, and this is related to financial planning. Grade 7 is identifying and describing reliable sources of information that can help with planning for and reaching a financial goal, whereas grade 8s are creating a financial plan to reach a goal. So the grade 7 there is really focused on this idea of using reliable sources. So there is a connection to the media literacy. And if you're working on that with your students, or maybe another teacher in your school is working on that, you may be able to get support from them, or from maybe a librarian in your school. But we thought this resource was quite good. Media Smarts. So how do you tell what's true online specifically? So some ideas there. Do they really exist? Look at the About Us page for whatever you're looking at. So if you're looking at a banking website, maybe find out what this bank is or what this company is. Or they say who they really are. Again, try to find out if this is really a legitimate source. Is it Canadian? Where are they based? And are they trustworthy? So you can search around some more about it and see what you can find out. So some ideas, just not to take what you see for face value. Do a little more research to make sure that what you're looking at is legitimate. And specifically here in relation to information about financial literacy, maybe credit cards you're researching, or investment products, or banking. So just doing a little more critical thinking around that. So really, their students are working on this idea of financial planning at this point, and it's important here to think about the idea of financial goals, first of all. So students will need to think about the financial goals they may wish to work towards. So financial goals could be something short-term or long-term, and again, they depend on an individual circumstance. For example, buying a pair of runners, or attending university, or being able to pay for a smartphone, different things they may wish to work towards, and then creating and thinking about a financial plan. So what's going to help them get to that goal? The next specific expectation is F1.3, and that's around budgeting. So creating, tracking, and adjusting sample budgets for grade 7. And grade 8, very similar, maintaining a balanced budget and using tools to track income and spending. So we're really now focused on this idea. We have a goal, we've made a plan. So how are we going to budget for this? How are we going to budget our income and our expenses over a set period of time, whether it be a weekly or monthly budget? So what's helpful here is really looking at budgets first for different maybe scenarios. This will provide opportunities for the students to learn about these financial concepts in real life context. So here's a sample budget. There's some guiding questions here, but you also might just give a sample budget and ask students what they notice and what they wonder, and have students look at that and analyze it. You might be wondering where to get sample budgets. We found that one on this website, practicalmoneyskills.ca. So you can go to that website. It's also linked in the resources to support for grade 7 and 8. If you click on for educators, you'll see lesson plans. So click that. And then the one I just showed came from the lesson called The Art of Budgeting. So there's lots of resources there that you could use. The other thing you may have noticed in grade 8 is to start looking at budgeting tools. A good rule of thumb is these percentages when we're generally thinking about our budget, but we will need more specific tools to help us out. There's lots of budget tools available online. Try to stick to Canadian sources if possible. And again, we want to be using good resources that are reliable. One is the Government of Canada resource. And again, the website we just showed you, Practical Money Skills, does have a budget worksheet. Again, these can both be found in the resources to support document. But of course, you can always use something like a spreadsheet tool, Google Sheets, to create a budget worksheet. F1.4 is about financial decision making. still. And grade 7 is identifying societal and personal factors that may influence these financial decision making, the decisions that you make. And grade 8 is more focused on the idea of simple and compound interest rate and how that affects our long-term financial planning. So for grade 7 here, many factors, including personal, family, cultural, and societal factors, can really impact our financial decision making. And awareness of these factors does result in a more informed decision. Long-term financial well-being requires careful consideration of a variety of factors. Social emotional learning skills and financial management concepts and skills are really concurrently developed in this expectation. So again, each person, family, community member may be facing a different financial situation. And some of these situations, like we said before, can be challenging. So again, a safe, respectful, and inclusive environment will really allow your students to explore these different situations. So for grade 8, the idea of simple versus compound interest. So simple interest is interest paid on the principal amount only of a loan or a deposit. So simple interest, you can see here in this picture, it's calculated by multiplying the interest rate of the daily interest rate by the principal only. And this is going to be done the number of days that elapses. So you can see $1,000 times 10%. There'll be $100 interest if the interest rate is 10%. So each time we just see $100 added here. So 100 plus 100 plus 100, gaining interest that way, as opposed to compound interest. So simple interest, we really don't see that in the real world, to be honest, but it does help us understand compound interest, which is really how the world operates. Compound interest is interest on interest. So it's interest paid on the principal amount of a loan deposit plus any previously accumulated interest. So we can see here we have the $1,000. It earns 10% interest, which is $100. So now we have $1,100. And then we calculate 10% of that, which is $110. And we're building more because we're building interest on interest. So given that this is more complicated to calculate, and there's a more complicated formula that students actually learn more about in higher grades, grade 11, for example, we often use a digital tool to figure out this calculation. It's nice to see this on a graph, so we can see the simple interest. So we see 100, 110, 120, 130. So we can see that $10 added every time. And you can see on the graph, it's a linear relationship, as opposed to compound interest, where we can see that it's not just $10 every time. We're earning interest on interest. And on the graph, it's a curve. So it's a nice connection back to this idea of linear and non-linear relationships and patterning. If you're looking for an interest calculator to help students understand this idea and play around with amount of money invested in different interest rates, you can find lots online. If you Google compound interest calculator, this is a Canadian one, getsmarteraboutmoney.ca. There's lots out there for students to play around with and try out different scenarios. So this one asks for an initial investment, how much you're going to add, interest rate, how often it's compounded, and how many years you plan to leave the money there. You can see how much money you can make over lots of years or with different interest rates. Okay, this one here, F1.5, is also about interest rates for grade 7. And for grade 8, we're looking a little bit more closely at loyalty and incentive programs. And you may have noticed we've talked now a lot about percentages and interest rates. So you can see a lot of connection to number. And this is really important to point out because it's your opportunity to do more of these number concepts as connected to something students are probably really interested in, this idea of money. One thing that's quite helpful is problem strings. We want students to be flexible with percentages. And these problem strings are from Pam Harris's book, Building Powerful Numeracy. This is a classroom routine which is purposefully designed as a sequence of problems so that as students work down, they can use a prior result to move forward. So for example, we're starting here with what is 100% of 40? So 40 is 100% of 40. So what is 200% of 40? So since we're doubling the percentage, we're doubling the number. And you can see as you work down, then you look at 50%, 25%, 10%. So there's some halving going on. So ways for students to build numeracy around mental math of percentages. So you really want to encourage students to be flexible and try to find clever strategies. So this is done very similar to a number talk where you may model students thinking. You're going to do this together as a class. Students may offer how they thought about it, and you're really looking for that clever way of thinking and helping students express their thinking and valuing different ways of thinking about it, of course, as well. This is also percentage. 10 is what percent of 20, and 3 is 100% of what. So the different ways of thinking about percentage. And again, you can make lots of these problem strings just by changing the numbers and following this same format. It'll work. Okay, so percents are ratios where the second number is 100, and they are proportional numbers. Students will have experienced percents. For example, if they've downloaded something, we're used to seeing these progress bars, or percent battery life on their devices is another place they may have seen this before. So how can they use this understanding to solve percent problems? So something like, what is 25% of 75? And when solving these various percent problems, there are lots of different models that can help students figure this out. And it's really important here that we're working on proportional reasoning and multiplicative thinking rather than just a procedure for solving these problems. So the first model that may help is a double number line. And this is just like the progress bar we were just looking at. One number line represents the quantity $75, and the other would represent 100%. We can start to partition out these two number lines. So 50%, if we cut both in half, that would be $37.50. And we can cut them in half again, which is 25%, and that's $18.75. So that's one way to think about it. The second way, we could set this up as a ratio or a fraction. And since percents and ratios refer to proportional amounts, whatever we do to one part of the ratio or the fraction, we're going to do to the other part in order to create equivalent fractions. So depending on how students think about this, they may recognize that to go from 100 to 25, I divide by 4. So I need to divide by 4 on the other side. They might recognize that 100, to go from 100 to 75, I multiply by 0.75. So I need to take 25 and multiply by 0.75 to figure out this number. Lots of ways to think about that. And finally, a ratio table. Ratio tables are tables where equivalent ratios or rates fill the columns. So to get from one column to the next, we multiply or divide both terms by the same amount. So students can start with the idea that 25% means 25 out of 100, and then I can work my way up because I know I want to figure out, well, what is that out of 75? So I can start writing equivalent fractions or ratios in here until I get to where I want to get to 75. So because both grades are going to be playing with this idea of percentage and interest rate and how that affects either investments or loans. You can also look at loan payoff calculators. Again, the source is there, but if you Google loan payoff calculators, you'll find different things students can manipulate. It's important, though, that grade 7 and 8 students do really understand that interest rates can have an impact over time on amounts that are either invested or borrowed, and investing small amounts of money over the long term can really yield significant gains. Or if you're paying off a loan, the higher the interest rate, the longer it's going to take and the more interest you're going to pay to the bank. And grade 8s, as I mentioned, are focused in again on loyalty and incentive programs. So thinking about maybe grade 7 and 8 students, I'm not sure how much familiarity they've had with loyalty and incentive programs, but maybe Scene Points is somewhere to go. You'll have to ask them if that's something that they've experienced. Why might you want a Scene card? There's even Scene credit card. So why might you want a Scene credit card over some other kind of credit card? There's lots of advantages and disadvantages to these different options. So something to discuss. So the grade 1.6, the final expectation here is about comparing interest rates and fees to determine the best option for grade 7. That's related to accounts at the bank or loans offered by various financial institutions. Grade 8, same thing, comparing interest rates, fees, and rewards to determine the best value and best choice for the scenario they may be considering. Bank websites are pretty helpful here. So you can look at options for different loans you may need to take out. You can look up all sorts of information about the different credit cards that they offer in terms of fees and interest rates. So lots of research can be done online. So that's about it. I hope this is helpful in planning for your financial literacy learning with your students.